So, welcome back, everybody. Another video, and I've got Deirdre with me again. Our last video was being with people in distress, and as Deirdre is one of my supporters in terms of my safety plan, we thought it would be useful to do another video about that. So, thanks for your time again. It's important just to say, and this really is my thing, safety planning. Safety planning is one of the tools that we know can help people who are in suicidal distress or wanting to self-harm. It is invaluable. There is a free online safety planning site called stayingsafe.net. You can get a safety plan online there because safety planning is for everybody. There's a assumption made that people who take their lives all of them are known to mental health services, and that's not the case at all. In Northern Ireland here, we have Lifeline, and Samaritans is all over if you are in distress. I guess I do training around community suicide awareness. The training I've chosen is with the organization, with the online resource called For Mental Health. And I chose that because they have that free online resource and it's a practical tool to give to everybody. I guess for me, as somebody who has been in services long term, who has experienced different crises over the years, who's had a key worker, I feel that the general safety planning that is out there is insufficient, that we could be doing so much more with it. So just to be clear from the beginning that I absolutely support and believe in safety planning and as it stands where it is. I'm just sharing my experience from work I've done in suicide prevention, as well as my own personal experience about ways that I think we could be supporting people so much more. Because ultimately this is about lives. And I think this week I have been just reminded again of what is at cost, because we can, in working with these issues, you can become quite removed from why we're doing what we're doing. So I'm just sharing these on my thoughts, and I am hoping to take this forward in some way. So I thought it would be really useful to have a conversation with you about that and our experience of safety planning. So a usual safety plan has things in it. Most of them have generic things in, like, so if you're feeling suicidal or wanting to self-harm, what can I do immediately? What are things that help soothe and calm me? How can I keep safe now? So that's about removing access to means and things. A safety plan will usually include who your supporters are, who you could call if you were feeling distressed or suicidal, as well as numbers of professionals or the likes of helplines that you can contact 24/7. Of course, there's always the emergency department, though we know the challenges with that. And if somebody is in immediate distress, to call emergency services. So I guess, Deirdre, you hadn't, if you've watched our previous video, we've known each other 2 years now, and Deirdre is somebody in my life, a friend, as well as, knows quite a lot about my history. And you've been with me in times of distress where I felt suicidal, wanting to self-harm, and just what that's been like. And I had 2.5 years ago, I had an 8-page safety plan, which was a bit much. But having said that, having been someone who's been through quite a lot in services, that was really important to me then to have down the things that I had down, and that if I was distressed or in crisis. In my safety plan, I do have a specific crisis plan for if something needs done now, what is it that we need to do? So I don't just have the things that help calm and soothe. There's also an immediate plan. And I think that's important as well, especially if you've been in crisis before, you have some learning that you can take forward from that to apply to the next situation. I've recently updated my safety plan after experiences of the last year. And I guess just in terms of that, it has been, I think we can look at a safety plan and we can assume that people know what to do that will help calm and soothe them. I've done a lot of training over the years with people with different mental health challenges or who are having difficulties. And in fact, that's been quite a difficult thing for them to do because we don't always know and we're not always taught those things. So that's first of all. There's also the issue that sometimes people don't have supporters. There's also the issue of when you have been very unwell and continue to be very unwell, sometimes it's not enough just what can I do now to distract, because you're not actually addressing, the issues. So I guess, where will we go from here?
Well, I suppose, would it be useful, I'm wondering if I explain that I was coming to safety planning as a complete outsider.
Mm-hmm.
So this, I mentioned in the previous video, my background is in palliative and end-of-life care. And I had never heard of a safety plan or knew anything about it until Lisa started to talk to me about it. But I did have something to relate it to, which I feel very strongly about, which is advanced care planning.
Mm.
And I think the idea at heart is very similar. In other words, it's sitting down now, making a plan for a time in the future where I may not be able to speak for myself. That's what advanced care planning is. And as I have come to understand safety planning, Lisa, it's you sitting well, thinking about, a time when I am not as well able to articulate what I need or want and to keep me safe, then this safety plan will help, so that you describe some of the things in your safety plan that are meaningful to you, that are important to you, and that keep you safe.
Mm.
So that was how I came to understand the heart and purpose of safety planning. And as I say, because of my own appreciation of the value of advanced care planning, I recognized immediately how useful and valuable this type of planning could be.
Can I say with that, and I hadn't actually thought about that, but with what you've just said there, that in fact captures what I'm trying to say about safety planning needing to be more than, because what often happens is a person will first come to see a safety plan when they may be referred into the crisis team, or first coming into services, or when you've been an inpatient and then you're leaving. So you might be making a safety plan at a time when you're just coming out of, or actually in a time of crisis and needing support. And that's really important to have things in place then and there. But it is so much more than that, and very often we look at that being an hour and a half exercise in services, when you're doing a safety plan. And what I'm saying is, yes, first time around, we put a safety plan in place. And remember, this is for people in services. I'm not talking about safety planning generally. This is my experience in terms of that. And it is, so that's put in place then. But as I become more well or come out of that crisis, it's actually looking back and reflecting on, okay, so what worked there, what didn't work, and I suppose I'm challenged with thinking it can be done in a short space of time, because say as my supporter, even talking to Gary about my safety plan, it is a collaborative piece of work. It is mine to own. But if I have you down as a supporter to do X, Y, or Z, that is a conversation that we need to have. And we can't assume that people know what the things are that they're in. And in my own journey, I have learnt new ways of helping ground and soothe myself and understood things better about me.
Yeah. So in my frame of reference, advanced care planning has been really useful because Lisa and I have, or at least Lisa has shared with me a draft of her safety plan when she is feels well enough to do that, and then that together for what would be helpful for me as one of Lisa's support people, what that looks like. And it's what it looks like when the distress isn't so severe, but also at a time of actual serious distress or crisis even, where Lisa is at risk, that, specifying what I can do and who I contact. So it has that level of detail in it, which is really useful for me as a support person to Lisa. And that, that Gary and I, Gary, Lisa's husband, that Gary and I talk to each other. But as well as that, Lisa, what I found really helpful in when you we were talking about your safety plan together, where you were saying, I was saying, oh, I don't know if I would ever make that decision. So, for example, a recent example when we were talking was, and if I am so unwell, you can ring the GP out of hours and they would admit me.
Yes, or the police. Yes, I'd said the police.
The police. And I remember
you were alarmed.
saying to Lisa, I'm not sure I would ever be in a situation or would feel comfortable about doing that, because I would be afraid that I am contacting people who don't know you and who that you wouldn't be happy with whatever decisions were made then. And Lisa was said back to me, yes, I understand what you're saying, but I am telling you now that if that situation occurred, I know that your intention is for my best and my welfare and my well-being, my safety. Therefore, I give you permission to contact the police if that situation arose. And that was a huge relief for me, because of course it's because I care about you, and because for Gary, because he cares about you. Of course, we don't want to be making decisions in a crisis that we are fearful then, how will this turn out for you? Whereas, and you were saying to us in this co-creating or collaborative drafting of the safety plan, you were saying, in my health now, I am giving you permission that if that time comes, you have my permission and blessing to make that phone call. That was really reassuring for me. So that was good. The other thing,
and can I just maybe expand on that a bit, because I have disappeared before and people haven't been able to find me, plus I have dissociation. So part of that is I can lose time. And the last thing I would want is for the police to be called. But I also accept, and I don't think that that's ever going to happen, but I also know enough to know that life is unpredictable. I don't know what. And in terms of valuing and respecting yourself and Gary, and Deirdre is very much part of that, because, you would know more about my therapy because we're friends. It's a different relationship to the one with Gary. So that would be the last thing, as someone who's experienced trauma, especially the thought of that. But I also understand that if you really couldn't find me and you believed my life was at risk, in fact, that is what the options are. We don't have other options. I mean, hopefully in the future, there will be crisis house, different things that people can go to. But it's also working with what is available. And I have to recognize that as somebody who's in services. And by giving you that permission now, when that does happen, and I maybe am angry with you because when I am unwell and my head's all over the place, and maybe I've got a bit of psychosis going on and paranoia and things, you know, I might be angry. I might feel that you don't care, or Gary, or whatever. But having that in place, in fact, protects our relationship, because I know that when I come out of that, that is something that we've agreed and we've worked on. So it is so important for if we're thinking about the whole person in the context of their friendships, their family, or whoever those supporters are, that by planning, you know, before, like with the advanced care planning, there's that mutual respect. But it's also important to say that my first safety plan, there were things that weren't clear for you in there. So in fact, when I went into quite a crisis, we came out of that and you realized that you needed more clarity about the steps to follow. So that was added in. But to say with yourself and with Gary is that we have really good, open, trusting relationships. You and Gary have a really good, open, trusting relationship. You know, we all know whose role is what, as well as with my psychiatrist, and you've met with her as well as with my therapist. So we all have that. Not everybody has that. And there can be difficult relationships and there can be disagreements about who does what. And sometimes when people have been in a supporting role for a long time, you know, that also becomes their role. And this working together and collaborative, you know, it can be fraught with a lot of emotion and tension. For me doing it with Gary, having been what we've been through with, it was quite a emotional and challenging conversation to have. And with my experiences with services, it's been the same with my new psychiatrist. You know, that's been about building trust and trying to explain and working with the limitations of what she has. So I guess I just don't want to make this seem like a panacea, because in fact, there are so many variables and complexities. And I'm so grateful that even with things being also good for me, it is still complex and challenging and time consuming. Sorry. And you were going to go on to a second point, but I just thought it was important to.
Yeah, and I think it was just that, Lisa, about that the safety plan is a live document. You know, it isn't like advanced care planning, which I keep coming back to because that is my reference point. It is something that does need to be revisited for that very reason. That following a crisis, Lisa, I realized in that time that I wasn't clear about phone numbers, or discovered actually that one of the phone numbers in the safety plan was incorrect. So that added some distress to me and some stress to me, because this was live in the moment where I was really concerned about your safety. So the safety plan is revised on the back of that. One of the things I really like about the safety plan, Lisa, and thought was really useful for certainly the first time I saw it, and I imagine for someone who's providing a service, for them to see for the first time, is there is a sense of who you are in the safety plan. And I think that is so important to give that, because that's the whole person. There is a sense of the whole person, and that helps me if I was at risk of losing sight of that and just focusing in on this self-harm incident or you know, concern about suicide. If I focus in that, this part of the safety plan that describes this person who is saying, you know, when I'm distressed, this helps soothe me, this helps regulate me, don't come too close, I like to have this in mind. You know, it just gives that fuller picture of who you are.
And those are things that
happens to be in crisis.
And that is so, I mean, that is the thing about dealing with, and I know it's frightening dealing with people who are suicidal or self-harming. But my experience was I was lost beneath all of that. You know, the human being, it was a dehumanizing experience. And that is not because I believe that anybody intentionally wanted to do that. But and that's about the culture of organizations as well, which are blame cultures. And, you know, it is complex, but I was so lost in that. And if we are actually wanting to help people, we need to access the human being, like we spoke about being with people in distress. You know, I don't need if I need to talk, I need to talk. And the things that I've put in there that help me, I've learned those. I didn't know all of that. That has also been an evolving, growing process. You know, what worked before maybe changed. Maybe I've added on things. My safety plan that we've just revised now is much shorter, but it's still 4 pages, because for me, it is really important to say, this is what I'm diagnosed with, and this is how, if I am distressed or thinking, this is how it presents for me, because I'm not my label. And just because I have a label of complex post-traumatic stress and dissociation and somebody else does, we're 2 individuals, we're people beneath that. So for me, it's about that autonomy. It's about a sense of control. And in fact, doing the safety planning and working with that, making those decisions when I feel more able to, also gives me a sense of, yes, I am more than this, you know, because I can also get lost in, oh, you're back here again, you know, what? And yet it has been, you know, with it being a collaborative process, I see each episode or crisis as really being so rich in learning, you know, and in developing relationships. Even with my psychiatrist, she said at my last appointment about with the revised safety plan, and she has input as well. You know, we discuss you know, inpatient treatments, home treatments, all of that kind of thing. But she said, this is so helpful. I need to go back to this to remind myself about what is important to you, you know, and that openness. And I'm open too, you know, I'm open to saying, well, I have to respect what you need. And I have to respect that, you know, my psychiatrist has the limitations of what she has in services. But in fact, and you know what my experiences with psychiatrists are, and I came away from my last appointment saying that did my heart the world of good. And I never thought I would say that about. But in fact, you know, it has been like that. And with us all working together, in fact, everybody wins, you know, because we all know what's.
There is another part in the safety plan, Lisa, that I have found really helpful, which is where Lisa describes a number. I think there are 3 of us specified as supporters. So the first is Gary, and there's a line or 2 that specifies Gary's particular role as a support. Then I am referred to as a support person. And then there's a couple of lines about what my support looks like. And then there's another person mentioned, and a couple of lines specifying what that person's role is. And it is so useful, because we're not all just this glob of support. It is actually really useful to say, you know, let me say it, because I want to protect the confidentiality of your document as well, Lisa. But so say, for example, I have dogs. So one of my supporters could be the person who, in the event of a crisis, this person is the one to go to take care of the dogs. Or another person is, this is the person to go to if you want to have a sense of what has been going on in the days or the week or 2 leading up to this crisis. So that's specified. So, and that I think really is useful, not only for you, Lisa, because you specify, but for those professionals then who are ready to respond to the crisis, because they can say, Okay, well, do I phone X, Y, or Z if I want some more information? Okay, it's Deirdre. I phone Deirdre for that type of information. I phone so that is very helpful, specified, and it gives people their place, and it protects supporters. It actually is a very protective piece of support, because we, as I say, it's important that we're not just, I would have been aware in my own professional life, where we would have some kind of bland statement about, strong family support network. And that's great to read that, but sometimes we need the detail of what does that mean in a crisis. So who do I contact?
You see, I should just have you along for training, because that is just exactly what it's about. And there's also a big issue in services with professionals contacting carers or supporters, because people don't always regard themselves as carers, with the confidentiality issue, and family dynamics and all of that. So I have specified in my documents that I give permission for yourself. And when we met with the psychiatrist, you came along one day, which was so helpful, in the appointment, but she did have to clarify that I gave permission for that. So those things are actually, really, really, really important. There was something else I was just thinking about there with the document.
I suppose the key has been, Lisa, that, your first draft was an attempt to cover in the event of, which was really useful and served a purpose at a time. And then as you knew more, and as the people around you knew a bit more, then it was appropriate on the back of an experience to revise that document. And again, to seek agreement and input from each of the people specified in it, to say, how does that feel? How does that sound? What would that look like? So then it's written with that revision and input from each of the people, and everyone's content with it. But if there came another time, that is a document that you would look at in another couple of years, because things could have changed for you again. Then things could have changed for one of your supporters. So this it's a live document that grows, is revisited, and to ensure that it is meaningful, I would respectfully suggest an hour and a half is not adequate. It is a series of ongoing conversations about.
Absolutely.
Isn't it?
It is. And something that's really important to me, we spoke about autonomy, keeping that power, because you can feel so powerless. And being in a crisis, I've been detained, and I do work around that as well. We can be re-traumatized by these experiences. So having specific things is about me feeling like I'm taking charge of it can be distressing, it can be a bit scary to think about those times. But in fact, I see it as a very positive step to be doing, and something that I put in my safety plan as well is what not to do when I'm in a crisis. Because so often we can escalate a situation. We spoke about that in being with, and that's another big thing, is de-escalating, because when you are distressed, your whole nervous system is, you can't listen and hear, you can't, your problem solving is gone. And if you're experiencing psychosis on top of that, hearing voices or seeing things, and somebody comes in and says, well, no, you're not, all best intentions, no, you really, there's not there. And you're seeing it, so I would have in mind as well, what happens when I get distressed with that kind of thing, a short explanation about it, because people can then respond appropriately, as well as what not to do, like coming close and asking permission. You might know that, but a professional wouldn't. And in fact, I had somebody in the crisis team, a young man, before taking my blood pressure, who said, are you okay for me to come and do that? He'd obviously read my safety plan, or would you like to do it yourself? those things mean an awful lot. I also have an advanced directive about ECT in that, although that's not legally binding, it is a conversation that has been really important for me to have around it. At the end of the day, what you say about this, this actually requires an ongoing conversation, a collaborative conversation. It's building trust, it's trying things out, it's revising, it's a dynamic document, and it takes time and investment, but what it does is, in fact, it can save a life, but it can also, where a situation could end up completely out of control, there's at least things in place that it doesn't have to get to that point. So do you think there's anything else?
I'm just wondering about this, Lisa, because I'm thinking about it now as we're talking, and I'm wondering about one of the things that strikes me about it is because you do it when you are well.
Well, we do, but people do it in crisis.
Yes,
and
as a starting point, but I would like to think that a best practice would be that that is revisited.
Yes, absolutely.
When a person's well, because you can even reflect then, you know, on what might be better. And all of us, that's what we want. You know, we want what's best for people.
Yeah.
But the other thing about it, I think that is really important is that it gives power and control back to the person. Because if you know, when I was first introduced to that in crisis, you know, you could ring the police, or you could ring out of hours, or you can contact that's a lot of power for me to have, you know, over a person who is in crisis. So the fact that a safety plan is done when that mutuality is there, that collaborative piece is there, where you are in charge. And that's why I think it is important that it's revisited. Absolutely. After a crisis, that the person has more authority and more of an ability to say what's important to them. It ensures that the person's rights are respected at that time of crisis. That is about rights-based practice. That's about respect. That's about autonomy, the person's right to self-determine. You know, there is
dignity as well.
All of dignity is in. And so, Lisa, I would have to say, having the experience of you know, looking at your safety plan and being part of those conversations around drafting and revising and creating it, you know, it has been such a good experience. And I share your belief in it, I have to say, because it fits with my value space, which is about people's rights.
And it so much supports this, you know, we talk about co-production, collaboration, all of that kind of thing, but it does take time and investments. And for people with key workers, this is a piece of work that, you know, I think the 10 years in and out of Bluestone, the inpatient psych ward, this is stuff that you could be developing, working on, learning in those, even the grounding, calming things, you know. I think there's so much in it that could be so helpful for people. That's not rocket science, that doesn't require specialist intervention or something. It's something that we can all work with and benefit from. So yeah, well, thanks again, Deirdre. Like I said, you could help run this. You said you know nothing about mental health, but I think it's so helpful to have somebody who hasn't been involved coming with your perspective and seeing it working live. So I really hope this has been useful, has helped you think of a few things. Some pointers, and as I referenced in the beginning about stayingsafe.net, where you can access an online safety plan, and there were the crisis numbers with Lifeline and Samaritans, and over the water, they're different things. So thanks very much.